The knock came sharply at midnight, 3 distinct raps that cut through the silence of my small apartment like a warning, not the casual thump of a neighbor, nor the confident bang of a delivery person, but something desperate, urgent, the kind of sound that makes your heart stop before your mind catches up. I had just poured a cup of chamomile tea, the steam warming my hands, when the echo of that knock set my pulse racing. I hesitated, listening. Outside, the street was empty, the glow of a lone street lamp painting long shadows across the sidewalk. My first thought was my son. Something in the tone, the timing, told me this wasn't casual. I could feel the weight of anticipation settling on my chest, a familiar ache from years of knowing that family could betray with the quietest steps. Pulling the robe tighter around me, I approached the door slowly, heart hammering. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender, remnants of my evening ritual, and for a moment, I clung to the ordinary to steady myself. Then I saw it, the lock. My eyes narrowed. The cylinder gleamed in the dim light, unfamiliar. My breath caught. The locks had been changed. A mixture of fear and clarity washed over me. They were coming not for conversation, not for reconciliation. They were coming for what they thought was theirs. My son, his voice, full of entitlement and anger, had always carried an undercurrent of impatience, but I hadn't realized just how far he would go. I leaned against the door, listening to the distant hum of the city outside, feeling the solitude and betrayal press into my bones. Memories flashed, the nights I stayed up tending to his homework, the mornings I rose before sunrise to make him breakfast, the sacrifices that went unnoticed. And now, at this moment, all those years of giving, of keeping the family afloat, seemed forgotten. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch a heartbeat longer, tasting both fear and resolve. This house, my home, my sanctuary, had been the stage for a lifetime of care, yet it was now a battlefield, and then I realized my voice had been silent for too long. Tonight, though, the first move had been made. The locks had been changed, yes, but I was still here, still watching, still breathing, still planning. The door loomed before me, but so did the memory of every decision I had ever made, every quiet victory that no one had acknowledged. And in that pause, that infinitesimal moment between fear and action, I knew this was only the beginning. I closed the door gently behind me, letting the lock click. A small victory, yet a fragile one. The house stood silent, almost expectant, as if it had been waiting for me to remember what it once was. Every corner, every hallway held echoes of laughter, whispered secrets, and years of tireless devotion. This wasn't just wood and stone. This was the tapestry of my life. I wandered slowly, fingers brushing the banister my husband had polished by hand, each groove carrying the memory of his care. The living room smelled faintly of cedar from the old shelves, mixed with the faint sweetness of sun-soaked curtains. My eyes lingered on the photographs, our wedding day, the first birthday of my son, family holidays etched into frames that had seen decades of joy. I remembered the nights I stayed up stitching curtains and sewing buttons onto shirts, baking bread and soup to feed hungry mouths, balancing every checkbook, every bill, every little need that arose in our home. This house wasn't just walls and windows. It was every sacrifice I had made, every decision I had quietly taken, every moment I had chosen to hold the family together while fading into the background. I walked past the kitchen, my fingers tracing the edges of the counters I had scrubbed clean, the stove I had polished until it gleamed, the pantry shelves stocked with meals planned and cooked in love. My son had grown up here, my husband had built a business with my silent support, and yet, the thought crept in like a bitter frost. Would they remember any of it now that they believed they were owed it all? The memory of the first day we moved in rose vividly, the smell of fresh paint, the squeak of the stairs, the excitement of imagining our life in each room. I had imagined a home full of warmth and laughter, and it had been exactly that, for a while, but over the years, the laughter had grown quiet. Walls that once echoed with life began to witness ambition, greed, and entitlement in subtle ways I had ignored. Hoping love could survive what pride-owned selfishness could not, I sank into the worn armchair in the corner, feeling the leather cool against my skin. I let my gaze drift to the window, where the streetlight cast a halo of gold on the front garden. This house was mine, and yet it wasn't. My son's plans, his impatience, his assumptions about inheritance, had already begun to claim what I had spent a lifetime building. I felt both anger and a strange calm, anger at the disregard for what I had given, and calm because I knew something they didn't. Every foundation of this house, and this family's fortune, had my fingerprints. My choices, my sacrifices, and in that quiet, in that pause between memory and reality, I realized they were about to learn the hard truth. The house had held my life, and I had not yet revealed that life's deepest secrets. Tonight, the first act of a reckoning had begun. The house had seen it all. The whispered confessions in the dark, the early mornings when I rose before anyone else, the nights spent cooking, cleaning, and planning, silently holding everything together. I had built this home with more than brick and mortar. I had built it with patience, sacrifice, and a quiet resilience that no one had acknowledged. I walked through the hallways, recalling every sleepless night I had spent comforting my son through heartbreaks, school rejections, and the challenges of growing up. I remembered how I had stayed behind the curtain while my husband faced the public, offering him the strength to appear invincible, even as I carried the weight of worry and doubt in silence. Every investment I had made, every careful choice, every word left unspoken had been part of keeping the family afloat. My son had grown up believing he deserved everything: the house, the inheritance, the wealth my husband built. He had no idea of the hidden scaffolding beneath it all. The nights I had sold family heirlooms to save the company, the hours I spent learning investment strategies to help secure their future, the countless quiet decisions that kept us from ruin, all of it invisible to him. He saw only what he thought was owed to him, not what had been earned through unseen labor. I paused at the kitchen, resting my hands on the worn counter where I had prepared countless meals, my mind replaying the countless moments of giving without expectation. I had mended torn clothes, delivered last-minute school projects, and sewn curtains to make rooms warm and inviting. I had done all of it quietly, without recognition, because love required it, because family required it, and because I believed in doing what was right, not what was applauded. And now, as I imagined him stepping across this very floor, as if it were his by default, I felt a quiet fury begin to simmer. He had never asked, he had never looked, he had never paused to consider the weight of what had been done for him. They were coming for a house, yes, but what they truly coveted was a legacy they assumed was theirs by birthright. Ignoring the hands that had quietly built it, I clenched my fists, letting the memory of all those sacrifices feed a sense of purpose. They had underestimated me. They had assumed silence was weakness, invisibility was acceptance. But I remembered everything, every sleepless night, every small act of defiance against despair, every moment I had chosen the family over recognition. It had not been forgotten, and it would not be ignored. This was the quiet before the storm. They were planning to take, to claim, to erase. But I had the history, the evidence, and the memory of every choice that had kept this family and this house intact. And soon, they would learn that the person they had dismissed as fragile, as old, as powerless, had quietly built an empire from the shadows. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, the way poison seeps into water. At first, it was the sideways glances, the whispered comments, the casual assumptions that this house, my home, my sanctuary, was theirs by default. I stood in the living room, watching as my son walked through, fingers grazing the furniture, as if claiming it before I could. "Mom, this table will look perfect in the dining room," he said, smiling faintly, not noticing my tightening jaw. His words carried an entitlement that had been nurtured for years, and I recognized it instantly. Every sacrifice I had made, every night I had stayed awake planning, worrying, building, all invisible to him. He didn't see the hands that polished these surfaces, the hours spent arranging each corner of this home so it felt alive, cared for, and warm. Then came the laughter, casual, cruel, a sound I had once associated with family gatherings but now felt like knives slicing through memory. His friends, his siblings, even my grandchildren joined in. They tapped, measured, and pointed, assigning rooms and corners, calling dibs on spaces as though they were picking toys from a store shelf. "This one's mine," someone said, slapping a sticky note on the grandfather clock. Another followed suit, marking the leather armchair, the cabinet with the wedding china. I sat silently, sipping tea I barely tasted, letting their greed wash over me. They didn't whisper, they didn't pause, they didn't notice me. My presence was irrelevant, a mere inconvenience in their quest to claim what they thought they deserved. My granddaughter measured the wall with her phone, planning renovations while I sat within steps of her calculations. My son's wife offered me a tray of champagne flutes with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're celebrating Dad's legacy," she said cheerfully. "Not mine, not ours, but his." I kept quiet, letting them speak, letting them claim. Each item they marked, each room they schemed over, sharpened a fire within me. They believed silence was submission, invisibility was consent. They were wrong, and then the casual cruelty began. Comments meant to belittle, questions aimed to humiliate. She built soup, he built an empire, one whispered, and laughter followed, light but cutting. Maybe she won't notice if we redirect her mail, another suggested. My chest tightened. I remembered every night I had stayed up, every meal I had prepared, every sleepless worry, erased in a few careless words. But beneath the sting, beneath the outrage, there was a plan forming in my mind. Every sticker they placed, every piece of furniture they claimed, every whisper of entitlement only strengthened my resolve. They were testing boundaries, assuming weakness. Yet every action, every thoughtless comment, was a thread I would later use to weave the evidence of their disrespect. Their greed, their blindness. I rose slowly, letting my presence become a shadow, an observer in my own home. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. And when the time came, every move they had made would be turned against them, not in anger, but in quiet, unshakable justice. Tonight, the first cracks appeared. Their laughter echoed, but the house, the walls that held every sacrifice, every memory, whispered a warning I was finally ready to heed. I would not be erased. I would not be invisible. And this house, this inheritance, would remind them of the truth. I was still here, that night. After the last footsteps had faded upstairs and the house fell into an easy silence, I moved quietly through the rooms that had been my life. Every photograph, every heirloom, every piece of furniture that had been casually claimed and marked was catalogued in my mind. I had kept secrets all my life, sacrifices tucked into corners, invisible to the world. Tonight, I would use that invisibility as my weapon. I pulled the folder from its hiding place beneath the loose floorboard in the laundry room. The room they had so thoughtlessly deemed my new bedroom. It was worn, leather-bound, and heavy with secrets. Inside were documents I had kept meticulously, bank memorandums, investment records, and handwritten drafts that traced back to the night my husband's company had teetered on the edge of collapse. They had no idea that the very fortune they thought belonged to them had been quietly saved by me. I sat at the edge of the cot, flipping through the papers, feeling the weight of years of unseen labor in my hands. The investments I had made with my dowry, my mother's heirlooms, the jewelry I had sold to keep the company afloat, it was all here, all documented, all undeniable. I traced my finger along the inked lines, the dates, the signatures. The proof of my contributions, my sacrifices, my quiet genius, was hidden in plain sight. The next step was simple, yet deliberate. I would let them believe they were winning, that they were claiming what they had been scheming for, while I quietly prepared for the reckoning. Every sticky note they slapped, every joke about my irrelevance, every whispered insult would be recorded in my mind, and later, it would serve as evidence. Their greed, their entitlement, their disregard for me, all of it would be undeniable. I revisited the rooms they had claimed, imagining the conversation with the lawyer I had secretly contacted. He had been my husband's counsel for decades, but he also knew me, my mind, my diligence, my foresight. Tomorrow, I would meet him with these documents, the culmination of years of quiet planning. He would understand what they had ignored, that I was not powerless, that my sacrifices had been pivotal, that the family's fortune and the company's survival rested on the foundation I had built in silence. But for tonight, I stayed in the shadows. I relived the memories, the nights spent learning investment strategies by candlelight, the hours writing proposals no one would ever credit to me, the quiet decisions that had kept everything alive. And I smiled, just barely. They thought they were claiming my home, my inheritance, my life. They did not know the storm they had awakened. Every step, every plan was measured. They had underestimated me, as families often do, mistaking age, quietness, and patience for weakness. But I knew the truth. Power lies not in noise, but in preparation, in silence, in the careful, patient construction of proof that could not be denied. I rose and walked slowly to the window, gazing at the front garden where roses my husband had planted were beginning to wilt. I whispered to them, to the memory of what had been nurtured here, and to the future that would honor me. You think this house is yours, but the roots run deeper than you know. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase, one that would turn their entitlement into astonishment. Every act of disrespect, every moment of arrogance, every assumption of power would become a testament to the truth they had ignored for so long. The silent plan was ready. The reckoning was approaching, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the thrill of inevitability. They would see me. They would have too. And when they did, it would change everything. Chapter 6. the shocking confrontation 700 words asterisk the next morning. I arrived at Mr. Alden's office, the folder clutched tightly in my hands, its contents heavier than any weight I had carried before. The rain tapped insistently against the windows, a soft drumroll for what was about to unfold. I could feel the anticipation knotting my stomach, but also a calm certainty. They had underestimated me, and today, they would see the truth. Mr. Alden greeted me with a small nod, his expression grave yet knowing. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded. Every sacrifice, every secret, every silent battle I had waged was about to confront the arrogance and greed that had consumed my family, one by one. The documents were laid across the polished mahogany table, the joint trust certificate, investment agreements from 15 years ago, the memoranda detailing my covert contributions, and finally, the original handwritten drafts of the IPO proposal. Each paper was proof, undeniable and absolute, of the life I had built behind the curtain while the family celebrated the surface achievements. When my son Joseph arrived with his wife and the grandchildren in tow, they carried the usual air of entitlement, confident, polished, certain that the house, the fortune, and the legacy were theirs to claim. They did not notice me, seated calmly at the head of the table, because they never had. "Mom," Joseph said casually, "what's all this?" I looked at him, my voice soft but firm. "It's everything you never asked about, everything you assumed was yours by default." As Mr. Alden began presenting the documents, I watched the color drain from Joseph's face. Each page, each proof of my contributions, was a nail in the coffin of his arrogance. The original proposal for the IPO, the one that had secured millions for the company, was in my handwriting, under a pseudonym no one had ever recognized. The analyst's report confirmed it. Every loop, every pressure point, every subtle stroke matched me perfectly. "This," Mr. Alden said, holding up the certificate, "is the formal recognition of the intellectual property belonging to Eleanor Brightwood." The pseudonym was hers. The rights, the royalties, the recognition, all returned to her. A stunned silence fell across the room. Joseph's hands trembled as he reached for the papers, but I withdrew slightly, letting the weight of truth settle. His wife gasped. The grandchildren froze mid-breath, and the smug certainty that had filled the room just hours before evaporated. You saved Dad's company," Joseph finally whispered, disbelief lacing his words. "All those years." I nodded, my chest tight with emotion but controlled. I did what had to be done, and I did it quietly, because that's what love demanded. But love does not mean invisibility forever. The legal documents confirmed it, the joint trust, the investments, the IPO royalties, all accounted for, all undeniably mine. Mr. Alden summarized the consequences. Joseph's inheritance was drastically reduced. The estate, the intellectual property, the rights to the IPO profits, and all remaining assets were legally secured in my name. Their shock was absolute. The veneer of control shattered. For the first time, I saw them as they truly were, entitled, arrogant, and unprepared for the quiet strength of someone they had dismissed. Every insult, every dismissive gesture, every sticky note claiming this one's mine had been a test of patience. I had waited for the perfect moment, and it had arrived. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the gravity of the victory but also its quiet justice. I did not gloat. I did not yell. I let the silence speak. It was louder than any scream, clearer than any argument. They had buried me in assumptions, erased my contributions, and mocked my patience. Now, the truth was undeniable, and it demanded respect. As I gathered the documents back into the folder, Joseph's face was pale, his voice trembling. I didn't know," he stammered. "I didn't know it was you." "I know," I said quietly, "and now you do." For the first time, the room acknowledged my presence, not as furniture or background, but as the woman who had built the map, who had saved a legacy, and who refused to be erased. The office was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of papers as I returned them to the leather-bound folder. Joseph slumped into his chair, silent, defeated. Stripped of the entitlement that had once made him so confident, his wife clutched her scarf, and the grandchildren shuffled awkwardly, their eyes wide, unsure how to reconcile the truth with the versions of reality they had grown up believing. I rose slowly, letting the weight of years and the victories of the day settle into my bones. I did not rush. I walked past them, past the remnants of arrogance and disbelief. Knowing that every step was a reclamation of my dignity, this house, this legacy, this life, it had always been mine, even when they had failed to see it. Mr. Alden handed me the folders, the final pieces of proof. The keys to my agency, it's all yours. He said quietly, everything you've built, everything legally and rightfully belonging to you, is now secure. I nodded, the tiniest smile touching my lips. It was a smile that had nothing to do with money or revenge, but with the quiet satisfaction of justice served. For years, I had lived behind the scenes, overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. Today, I was seen. Today, I was recognized. As I left the office, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened, reflecting the soft light of a clearing sky. I breathed deeply, tasting the air, feeling the freedom of space that was truly mine, no sticky notes claiming ownership. No laughter at my expense, no reminders that I had once been erased. Back at the house, the realization was bittersweet. I walked through rooms that had once been mine in every way except acknowledgement. The furniture, the memories. The air itself carried echoes of laughter, of neglect, of dismissal, but now, it felt different. Each step was a statement, each glance a quiet assertion. I had not only survived, I had reclaimed. I went to the garden, where the roses my husband had planted years ago were starting to wilt. I knelt beside the soil, hands brushing the dry earth, and whispered, "We bloom again." The pomegranate tree still stood stubbornly by the window, a reminder that roots run deep, even when the branches are battered. I watered the plants slowly, deliberately, tending the roots like I had tended my own life, quietly, patiently, with unwavering care. The house would be sold soon, not out of anger or spite, but because it no longer needed to anchor me. It had served its purpose as a stage for lessons learned and truths revealed. I would move to a smaller place, somewhere by the sea with wide windows, white curtains, and the hush of waves as my companion. Peace would be my inheritance. The royalties from the patent continued to arrive, but I did not need them for myself. I used them instead to start a small foundation. A fund for women who had been erased, overlooked, or dismissed, scholarships, grants, recognition for those whose brilliance had gone unnoticed. Quiet justice, given where it was most needed. I kept a few essentials, a few memories, a drawing from a grandson long ago, crayon on construction paper, a stick figure of me next to a giant light bulb, with the words, "You think better than Google." I placed it carefully in my new home, a reminder that the work, the care, the mind that had been invisible for so long was finally recognized, and finally free. As the sun set over the horizon, I sat by the window, listening to the waves, feeling the quiet strength of a life reclaimed. I had been buried in assumptions, dismissed, ignored, and yet, I had survived. I had planned, waited, and executed with patience, and now I could live, truly live, in the clarity of truth, justice, and freedom. The house, the legacy, the inheritance, all had been tests, and I had passed them, not with anger, but with dignity. The family had learned, too late, that silence is not weakness, patience is not consent. And the mind that quietly builds a legacy cannot be erased. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight lift, the quiet power settling in. The world was vast, the sea endless, and my story, my voice, finally fully mine.